My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the man who destroyed my life piece by piece, while everyone thought I was too quiet to fight back. The camera opens with me sitting in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turn white. Outside, the courthouse looms, its gray stone walls heavy with the weight of truth and lies. My voice trembles, but it doesn't crack. It's steady now, because silence, the very thing people thought was my weakness, became my sharpest weapon. For months, maybe even years, everyone assumed I was broken, that I was the wife who lost too much, who didn't have the strength to speak up, who swallowed humiliation until it nearly choked her. They thought I was too fragile to fight, too polite to strike back. But what they didn't realize was that every time I stayed quiet, I was writing the blueprint of my revenge. I learned to smile in the face of pity. I learned to nod while people whispered about me in the grocery store. And I learned to act small. So he, the man who once promised to protect me, never saw the storm I was building in silence. He didn't just take my marriage, he took my career too. He twisted my family against me, feeding them lies so carefully wrapped in charm that they believed him over their own blood. And the worst part, I let it happen because I trusted him. I trusted him so completely that when he betrayed me, it didn't just hurt. It felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. So let me ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so much that when they betrayed you, the betrayal didn't just break your heart, it rewrote your entire life? Because that's what he did to me. He rewrote my story without my permission. But here's the thing about stories. The author doesn't always get the last word. Sitting in this car, just minutes away from stepping inside that courthouse, I know what's coming. He doesn't. He thinks today will be his victory lap, the moment he finally erases me completely. But I've spent months, no years, building the truth brick by brick, collecting evidence he never thought I'd find, listening when he thought I wasn't, waiting when he thought I'd already given up. Today, silence ends. Today, the storm breaks. And when it does, he'll learn the most painful lesson of all. The woman he thought was too quiet to fight back was the one writing his downfall all along. I didn't come from wealth. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew your business before you even had a chance to explain it. My mother raised me and my younger sister, Claire, on her own after my father passed when I was 12. She was the kind of woman who never raised her voice, but somehow her silence carried more weight than any shout. She taught me to be resilient, to endure storms without showing fear. But she also taught me to stay quiet, to avoid drawing attention. And so, I became the quiet one. Introverted, observant, the kind of girl teachers forgot to call on and neighbors barely remembered. People always underestimated me, and maybe that became my camouflage. Then there was Daniel Harris. He was everything I wasn't. Confident, charismatic, a man who could walk into a room and bend it around him with a smile. He was ambitious, a young lawyer with his eyes set on a future that looked bigger than our little town. And somehow, in the middle of his orbit, he noticed me. It was intoxicating. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. He listened to my thoughts, asked me about my art, told me I was extraordinary in ways no one else had ever bothered to. His charm wasn't just surface level. At least, that's what I believed back then. He made me laugh. He made me feel safe. He made me believe in forever. Our romance was a whirlwind. Dinners that turned into long walks under streetlights. Late night calls that blared into dawn. the kind of love story people envy from the outside. Everyone told me I was lucky, and I believed them. When Daniel proposed, I didn't hesitate. I thought I was stepping into a partnership, into a future where love and loyalty would be the foundation. And because I believed in him so much, I made sacrifices without a second thought. I had a promising art career starting to take shape. I'd been offered a residency that could have launched me into galleries I'd only dreamed of. But Daniel's career was demanding. He needed support, someone to keep the home steady while he climbed the ladder of his legal ambitions. So I put my dreams on hold. I told myself love required sacrifice, and I was proud to be the woman behind the man. Looking back now, that was the first seed of my undoing. Not the sacrifice itself, but the way I gave it so freely, without ever questioning if he would do the same for me. My sister Claire saw things differently. She was 2 years younger, louder, bolder. Where I was cautious, she was reckless. We were close once, sharing secrets under blankets, whispering about futures we hadn't yet lived. But as we grew older, competition crept in, unspoken, but sharp. She was always the one who demanded attention, who dazzled at family gatherings while I stood in the background. At first, she loved Daniel too. She teased me about how lucky I was, how I'd snagged the town's golden boy. But over time, I noticed her smiles carried edges. Her compliments dipped in envy. I ignored it, told myself it didn't matter. Family was family. Loyalty was everything. That loyalty to Daniel, to Claire, to everyone but myself became the thread running through my life. I believed love meant giving without keeping score. I believed family meant standing by each other, no matter what. And maybe that's why betrayal cut so deeply when it came. Because I wasn't just betrayed by a husband. I wasn't just betrayed by ambition or lies. I was betrayed by the very people I had sacrificed everything for. Sitting here now, outside this courthouse, I realized something I wish I'd understood years ago. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means waiting, observing, learning. And I had learned more than Daniel or even Claire could ever imagine. But back then, in the early days, I was just a woman in love. A woman who gave up her art, her independence, her own light to hold up someone else's. A woman who thought loyalty would protect her. And that vulnerability, that blind devotion, became the weapon Daniel used to unravel me. He thought I'd stay quiet forever. He thought I'd keep swallowing betrayal like I had swallowed sacrifice. What he never saw, what no one ever saw, was that the girl who grew up quiet, invisible, underestimated, was paying attention, and one day that silence would become his undoing. The night I discovered the truth didn't begin with fireworks. It was ordinary, the kind of night that should have faded into memory. Daniel said he had late work again. I stayed home, sketchbook on my lap, half-heartedly drawing lines that never formed into anything real. But then, while gathering laundry, I found some tétane. At first, I thought it was nothing. Just another one of Daniel's things. A phone I didn't recognize slipped between his suits in the back of our closet. My hands shook as I picked it up. Why would my husband have a second phone? My chest pounded as though my body already knew what my mind refused to believe. I turned it on, the screen lighting up in my hands like a doorway into hell. The messages were endless. Late-night texts, some short, some sprawling, all brimming with the kind of intimacy that once belonged to me. The words weren't polite or careful. They were raw, familiar, hungry. And then I saw the name, Claire, my sister. For a moment, the world tilted. I remember dropping the phone, my breath catching like I'd been shoved underwater. I stared at her name on the glowing screen, waiting for it to disappear, waiting for it to make sense, but it didn't. It was there in black and white, her words, his replies, jokes only she would make, promises only he would whisper. I scrolled, and the deeper I went, the worse it became. Memories of nights Daniel had said he was working late collided with texts that told another story. Nights I thought he was preparing cases. He was with her, my own sister. The kind of betrayal that slices clean through you, leaving nothing but fragments. I don't remember how long I sat there, my back against the cold closet door, the phone burning in my palm. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw everything we owned against the wall, but I couldn't. My body froze, locked in silence. Silence. The one thing I'd been taught all my life. It wasn't just the affair. It was who? It was Claire, the girl I shared a bedroom with, the sister I once whispered secrets to in the dark, the only family I thought would never turn on me. And it wasn't just her betrayal either. It was the humiliation, the realization that maybe others already knew. His colleagues, her friends, whispers traveling in corners I hadn't heard, laughter shared at my expense, the quiet wife, so easy to discard, so easy to play for a fool. I felt stripped of everything, my identity as a wife, a sister, a woman who mattered. In their shadows, I had disappeared. The tears didn't come right away. They came later, in the dark, when I buried my face into my pillow so the walls wouldn't hear me break. The sound wasn't pretty. It wasn't cinematic. It was animal. But beneath the grief, beneath the collapse of everything I thought I knew, something else began to form. Anger. Not the kind that flares and burns out. The kind that runs cold, precise. The kind that waits. Because as I sat there, staring at the evidence of my destruction, one thought grew louder than the rest. If they thought I was too quiet to fight, they had no idea what silence was capable of. That night, something inside me shifted. I stopped being the woman who swallowed sacrifice and betrayal in silence. I became the woman who would use silence as a blade, sharpened against the lies they thought would bury me. Daniel believed he had rewritten my story. Claire believed she had taken my place. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I was already writing a new story. A story where betrayal wasn't the ending. It was the beginning. Confrontation was never my style. But after that night in the closet, I thought maybe, just maybe, if I looked Daniel in the eye and asked him directly, he'd confess. Maybe there was some sliver of the man I once loved left inside him. So I waited until morning. The phone was still hidden in my nightstand, my hands trembling every time I touched it, but I carried its weight like a weapon. When Daniel came home, tie loosened, smelling faintly of whiskey and cologne that wasn't mine, I stood in the kitchen with the evidence in my hand. "I found this," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. His eyes flicked to the phone. For the briefest second, I saw the crack in his armor. Then it was gone. "You went through my things?" His tone was sharp, scolding, as though I were a child who had crossed a line. I swallowed. "Why do you have this? Why are you—" My throat closed on her name. Saying it out loud felt like swallowing glass. "Why are you texting Claire?" He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. Instead, he smirked, tilting his head the way he did when cross-examining witnesses. "Emily, you're imagining things again. You've always been paranoid, over-emotional paranoid. Over-emotional." The words struck me like blows. They were familiar, subtle refrains he'd planted over the years, seeds of doubt designed to make me question myself, gaslighting disguised as concern. "Those messages," I whispered, holding up the phone like a lifeline. They're real. He shrugged. Out of context, anything looks bad. Claire's been supportive, that's all. You've been distant, caught up in your little sketches, and I needed someone to talk to. Supportive? My voice cracked. You kissed her. You told her you loved her. For the first time, his jaw tightened, but he quickly masked it with a cold laugh. Emily, you're reading into things like you always do. Honestly, I think you need help. Help, as though the problem wasn't betrayal, but my inability to quietly accept it. And then there was Claire. I confronted her too, though every fibre of me wished it wasn't true. We met in the cafe where we used to sit as teenagers, sipping milkshakes and planning futures that no longer belonged to us. She arrived late, unapologetic, her hair perfectly curled, her smile sharp. You and Daniel, I began, my hands trembling around the coffee cup. How could you? She didn't deny it. She didn't even blink. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand like a queen addressing a servant. Emily, she sighed, you've always been so dramatic. Daniel was never really yours. You clung to him like a child clings to a toy, but deep down, you had to know. He deserves someone who matches his ambition, not someone who hides behind canvases and silence. Her words sliced deeper than Daniel's denial. He had stolen my marriage, but Claire, my sister, had stolen my family, my very sense of belonging. And she wasn't done. You need to grow up, she added, her voice dripping with condescension. This isn't betrayal. It's life. Daniel and I, we make sense. You should accept it. When I told my mother, hoping for even a flicker of outrage, she sighed and shook her head. Emily, you always did exaggerate. Claire told me her side. She says you're unstable, making things up. Maybe you should let them be happy. Her words crushed me. I had lost not just a husband, not just a sister, but an entire family that had chosen to believe them instead of me. My mother's silence, once my anchor, now became another weight dragging me under. I spiraled, quietly. In public, I forced myself to smile while Daniel and Claire began appearing together. Subtle at first, then bolder, flaunting their relationship like a prize they'd earned. At family dinners, they sat close, whispering. At community events, he rested his hand on her lower back as though I were invisible. The humiliation was complete. I was the discarded wife, the jealous sister, the dramatic one. Behind closed doors, the breakdowns came. Silent sobs into pillows, sketchbooks torn in half, nights staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage, wondering how much of it had been a lie. But something else grew in those dark nights. Resolve. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't lash out. Instead, I began to listen, to observe, to document. I became meticulous. Every bank statement Daniel left on the counter, I photographed. Every whispered phone call, I recorded when I could. Every bill that didn't add up, I logged in a hidden file. The quiet wife they mocked was learning the language of evidence. And then I uncovered more than I expected. Daniel wasn't just unfaithful. He was crooked. The charming lawyer, the rising star, he had been embezzling from his own firm. Small amounts at first, clever enough to go unnoticed. But greed grows. Debts piled up, hidden behind shell accounts and false invoices. And Claire, blinded by whatever she thought was love, was helping him. Transfers made in her name, documents signed without hesitation. I should have felt pity. I should have felt fear. Instead, I felt clarity. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was professional, legal, dangerous. And I realized something that made my pulse steady for the first time in months. Their downfall didn't need my anger. It needed my silence. So I stayed quiet. I let them believe they had won. I let them strut through town, hand in hand, pitying me as though I were broken. All the while, I built my case piece by piece, stone by stone. Every night, as I tucked away another shred of proof, I whispered to myself, quiet isn't weakness. Quiet is strategy. And though grief still gnawed at me, though I still woke some nights clutching the empty space in my bed, tears soaking the pillow, anger was there too. A colder, sharper anger that refused to die. I wasn't the discarded wife. I wasn't the dramatic sister. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I was the storm they never saw coming. Revenge doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives quietly, like a storm building over the horizon, until suddenly lightning cracks the sky wide open. For months, I waited in silence, collecting everything: bank records, falsified invoices, late night recordings, texts between Daniel and Claire that no lawyer could ever explain away. I was patient, careful, and when the time came, I didn't strike with rage. I struck with precision. It began with a manila envelope. Inside, a carefully compiled dossier of Daniel's financial crimes. Anonymous, of course. It landed on the desks of his law partners one morning, and on the same day, another packet arrived at the IRS. His empire of lies collapsed in hours. While he scrambled to contain the fire, another blow landed. Divorce papers, not ordinary ones. These were laced with undeniable proof of infidelity, misconduct, and financial fraud. Every page was a nail in the coffin of the persona he'd built. The courthouse became my stage. Daniel entered in his tailored suit, shoulders squared, that smug smile carved onto his face like it had been for years. He thought this would be easy. He thought he'd charm the judge, twist the narrative, and paint me as the hysterical wife. But then the evidence spoke. Emails projected onto courtroom screens, texts between him and Claire, vulgar and undeniable, bank statements tracing stolen money into personal accounts. His confident mask began to fracture. His jaw clenched tighter with every exhibit, his hand tugging at his tie as if the room was suffocating him. And Claire, poor, deluded Claire, was dragged into it all. She sat in the gallery, her face pale as her name appeared again and again on documents she'd signed for him. Transfers, authorizations, proof that she hadn't just been the mistress, she'd been his accomplice. By the end of that day, she wasn't Daniel's shining prize anymore. She was tainted, her reputation shredded in front of everyone who once admired her. Her employer fired her within the week. Friends who once gossiped with her now crossed the street to avoid her. Daniel's collapse was brutal. His firm suspended him pending investigation. The IRS froze his accounts. The man who once strutted through town as though the world bent to him was suddenly cornered. His empire turned to ash. But I wasn't done. The twist was personal. Claire had always dreamed of one thing: the pristine White House at the end of Maple Lane. She bragged about it for years. How one day she'd live there, how perfect it would be for the image she wanted. When that house went up for auction, I made sure I was the highest bidder. Weeks later, when Claire's life was unraveling and she finally scraped together the courage to try to move forward, she went to see that house. And there I was, standing on the porch, keys in hand, smiling quietly. I didn't need to say a word. The look on her face was enough. But in court, that was where I chose my moment. Daniel tried to speak. He tried to twist it all, to insist I had overreacted, that I had destroyed him out of spite. His voice rose, desperate, echoing off the marble walls, and I stood, calm, steady. You thought I was weak because I was quiet, I said, my voice slicing through the room, silencing even the judge's gavel. But quiet doesn't mean powerless. The room fell still. Daniel froze, his mouth hanging open, words stolen from him for the first time in his life. In that silence, my silence, his world ended. The divorce was granted in my favor. Assets divided, debts exposed, custody denied. The court stripped him of everything he had tried to take from me. And when I walked out of that courthouse, it wasn't as the discarded wife, the dramatic sister, or the quiet one. I walked out as the woman who had taken her power back. Claire avoided my eyes as I passed her. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, shrinking into the corner as whispers followed her. Daniel sat slumped, the same man who once looked untouchable, now reduced to nothing but a headline waiting to happen. And me? I didn't need to scream. I didn't need revenge painted in fire. My silence had been enough. My silence had destroyed them. Because silence, when sharpened, becomes the deadliest weapon of all. When the dust settled, I realized something important. My victory wasn't just in court. It wasn't just about Daniel's ruined career or Claire's destroyed reputation. It was about me, about the voice I found when I finally chose silence as my strategy and truth as my weapon. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. My days were mine again. I pulled my old canvases out of storage, the ones I had packed away when I traded my art for Daniel's ambition. At first, the paintbrush felt foreign in my hand. My strokes were shaky, hesitant, as though I were asking permission to exist. But slowly, the hesitation faded. The canvases filled with color, raw and unpolished at first, then deliberate and powerful. I painted survival. I painted betrayal. I painted the woman I had been, fragile, quiet, underestimated, and the woman I had become. Galleries began to notice. Collectors began to call. My art was no longer a hobby. It became my livelihood, my independence, my declaration that I had rebuilt myself from the ashes. Financial stability came, not from clinging to someone else's success, but from my own hands. I learned to stand on my own, without apology, without permission. There's a certain strength that comes from knowing you can survive the worst and still rise. That strength lived in me now, pulsing in every brushstroke, in every choice I made. And yes, I won't lie, there was a grim satisfaction in watching Daniel's downfall continue to unfold. His firm cut ties completely. The Bar Association opened an investigation. He became a cautionary tale whispered in hallways where his name once commanded respect. Claire, once so eager to bask in his glow, was left standing in the ruins. They tried to cling to each other, but betrayal doesn't make a strong foundation. Eventually, even that crumbled. One afternoon, months later, Claire appeared at my door. She looked different, worn down, shadows under her eyes. The sharp confidence she once carried dissolved into something fragile. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just, I thought he loved me. For a moment, I saw the sister I used to know, the girl I once whispered dreams with under the covers. And for a heartbeat, I almost wanted to forgive her. But then I remembered every night I cried into a pillow while she held the man who had vowed to love me. I remembered every time she called me dramatic, every time she told others I was unstable, every time she twisted the knife deeper. Claire, I said softly, forgiveness isn't weakness, but it also isn't owed. Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted absolution, but I had none to give. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I had learned that some wounds don't heal with apologies. Some wounds become part of who you are, a scar you wear, a reminder of what you survived, and that was enough. Revenge had never truly been about destroying them. That was the surface, the spark that fueled me. But the deeper truth was this: revenge was about rebuilding myself, proving to me, not to them, not to anyone else, that I could rise stronger, that I could take the silence they once mocked and turn it into power. Today, my life is quieter, but in the best way. I paint in the mornings, my studio filled with light. I sip coffee without dread of whose messages might be buzzing on a hidden phone. I walk through my home, bought with my own money, my own strength, and I feel peace. I don't gloat. I don't chase updates about Daniel or Claire. Their names no longer define me. But when I do hear whispers of his downfall or of her struggles, I don't feel pity. I feel distance, freedom. Because the truth is, I didn't just take revenge on them. I reclaimed myself. And maybe that's the most powerful revenge of all. The studio is quiet, except for the soft scratch of a brush against canvas. Sunlight filters through the tall windows, spilling across half-finished paintings. Bold, jagged strokes of color, fragments of faces, shadows that bleed into light. I sit alone, paint on my hands, a mug of cold coffee beside me. For years, silence was the space I drowned in. Now, it's the space I create in. People always ask me if revenge made me happy, if it erased the pain. The truth? It didn't. Nothing can undo the night I found that phone. Nothing can rewrite the moment I realized the two people I trusted most had carved me open without hesitation. That pain is part of me now. A scar stitched into every brushstroke, every piece I create. But revenge gave me something else. Closure. A way to say, you didn't win. You never truly won. I think of Daniel sometimes, not with longing, but with clarity. The man who once controlled every room now struggles to control his own narrative. His name is whispered, not celebrated. Claire, too. She wanders in the shadows of choices she can't take back. I don't gloat. I don't need to. Watching them crumble was never the point. Rebuilding myself was, and I did. Now, when I step back from a finished canvas, when I see the raw beauty of survival splashed across color and shadow, I know I've reclaimed something far more important than revenge. I've reclaimed me. I set my brush down, wiped my hands on an old rag, and looked directly into the quiet. They mistook my silence for surrender. But the truth is, quiet was just my strategy, and it was the loudest revenge I could ever take.